So I just wanted to say that today's episode is sponsored by Asea Redox signaling molecules. Now, it comes in two forms, the liquid and the gel, plus there's a huge other product range for us. But why did I start taking Asea, and why is it now an integral part of something that my whole family, both four-legged and two-legged, take every single day? Plus also something that all the clients I work with, again, four-legged and two-legged, it's number one on my priority list. Well, part of what I do, what I'm passionate about, is understanding the challenges that are affecting each and every one of us in today's modern living. The more you know, the more sometimes you wish you didn't know, but the pollution in the air, in the water, in the food, the control of our minds, the propaganda. But one of the things that we can do is take back responsibility for our own health. Now, every single cell of our body, whether we're an animal, whether we're one of the dogs in the backgrounds or one of my plants, contain these redox signaling molecules, and cellular health and cellular communication is absolutely key, whether you want to get your body back in balance, whether you want to reverse the aging process, whether you want to address any particular challenges that you've got physically, emotionally. It all starts with healthy cells. If your liver cells are healthy, your liver's healthy. If your brain cells are healthy, your brain's healthy. But just like a mobile phone, most of us have got mobile phones that we use on a routine basis now, but that mobile phone, regardless of whether you've got the latest model, is completely useless without a signal. So what does this technology do? The gel is something that you can apply topically over particular areas of concern, whether you want your skin to look better, whether you've got a cellulite, whether you've got an area that's causing you a challenge. The liquid is something you drink each and every day to top up what should be in your cells anyway. But when our bodies are stressed, diseased, challenged, or as we age, we make less of them. So personally, I wouldn't be without it. My sleep's better, my energy levels are better, my mood's better, my mobility's better. If you want to find out more, the details are below. But I'm so grateful that this came into my life, and I'm so grateful I can share it with others. I hope you love it as much as I do. Let me know. Right, I am quite excited to be doing something a bit different with you all today. Now, one of the things that I always do is I do a lot of research by listening to different things, reading different things, really trying to work out what on earth is going on in this mad, mad world. And part of that is I love listening to podcasts, and I have a very diverse range of podcasts that I listen to, because my channel is all about expanding consciousness through curiosity. Sorry, my dog's drinking very loudly in the background. But to do that, what I'm really fascinated about is I'm fascinated about human behavior and animal behavior. I'm fascinated about mind control. You're being very noisy with that, Lola. I'm fascinated about mind control and about how easily programmable we are as humans. And I don't say that lightly, because anyone who's studied even epigenetics, anyone who's studied any of the cult behaviors, and I've covered quite a bit of that on my channel, people who have really looked at how the brain develops, you know, as it's famously said, the Jesuits say, give me a boy until he's 7 and I'll show you the man. And we know all of these things can be used for the positive and for the negative. So the laws of the universe are quite specific, and at the moment I haven't seen anything to dispute them, and unfortunately who plays those rules better wins a lot of the time. So I think it's really fascinating to open our heart and minds up to different ways of looking at situations. So what I was going to do over the next few weeks is really take some clips out of some of my favorite podcasts that I've listened to and just discuss a few of them with you. And I'm really intrigued to see your thoughts in the comments and what this provokes in you, what reaction it provokes, whether you've seen it, what you thought about it, did it make you look at any aspects in a different way? So the one I've chosen today is Candace Owens interviewing Andrew Tate. Now, I don't know how many people know these two. I say these two, this is the first time, as far as I'm aware, they've met. But they've both got huge, huge audiences. And this was a over 3 hours podcast that I listened to. And in my opinion, there were some absolute gold bits of information in there. I think it's fantastic that it's still up on YouTube. I've clipped a few bits out to share with you today. I'm really intrigued to see what your reactions are. I've got loads and loads of clips from this interview. So if you like it, let me know and we can do a part 2. I just have got no idea whether this is going to be of interest to people. But for me, I love listening to how people express some things. I love connecting the dots. And in this interview, there's so many things that are connecting into what we've all been experiencing. I keep saying over the last few years, but obviously a lot of people have been well aware of the mass manipulation for a lot longer than this. So I'm going to play 3 clips to you today. I'm going to give a little bit of my thoughts on it. I really, really, really want to hear in the comments below your thoughts on it, because everyone's going to be looking at it through their own lens. And therein lies the beauty of why we're in this mess globally at the moment, in my opinion. Let's start with the first one. I'm going to share my screen. So I've put the titles in here because I've clipped out different bits about different bits I want to do. So let's hear what Andrew and Candace have got to say about resisting financial freedom.
Largely conservative minded, and I have this massive fan base, and then you're going to attack me and say Andrew has a car and that's bad. Yes, well, then, is that the fight you want? Is that how you're going to win this culture war?
I very much separate myself from the conservatives that do that. I'm like, this is on my show. I'll show a clip. I'm like, I can't believe this is even being passed around as something that should be taken seriously. It's so stupid. Yeah. It's so ridiculous. It's so obviously content for guys. Yeah. This is what I imagine if my husband left to his own devices and he's around all of his lads in the UK. I mean, the stuff they talk about is just so stupid. But then he thinks the same thing about me when I'm with all of my girls. It's so stupid.
Completely.
And we do need to stop being so severe. Okay, it's materialism. Okay, I get what you're trying to say, but also this is just fun content for guys.
But then let's also talk about the materialism thing, right? Because it's interesting to me that conservatives will sit and say, oh, materialism is bad or it's anti-Christian, etc. And I understand where there might be a point to argue there. But I tell you something, if you're completely and utterly broke, then you need the government to eat, then you're in a lot of trouble. We talk about the matrix and resisting the matrix. One of the tools to doing that is financial freedom. And that's just one of the baseline realities of it. I'm not saying you should sell your soul for money. Absolutely not. But if you want to truly resist the matrix as a whole, you need to have money to do it. It's pretty hard to do when you're broke. Even me as a person, if I had no money, the current situation I'm in would absolutely and utterly destroy me. I would be completely and utterly wrecked. Like, how could I pay my bills? I've taken $15 million of my money. I'm locked in my house. So you need to have a degree of financial freedom. Otherwise, you're going to end up just doing what you have to do to eat. You look at these people in England. There was a video that recently was on Twitter. I felt really sad when I saw it. It was a workman taking down the British flag and putting up the pride flag. And someone shouted at him, hey, bro, you're removing the wrong flag. And he goes, I know, mate. I know.
You're taking the wrong flag down, mate. I don't know that. We know that. At least you know that. 100%.
But he had to pay the bills. He has to feed his family. What can he do? He's a flag hanger. All he can do is hang the flags. If he doesn't do it, someone else will do it. He loses his job. So if you're completely and utterly reliant on a wage or you have no money, well, now you have a new tool of enslavement. COVID was all based around that. I just got to go to work. Just get the injection. I got to wear the mask. I got to fly. I got to work. It takes a lot of money to sit down and say, no, I'm too principled. That takes money to do. So it's also interesting that conservatives want to attack materialism. Okay, perhaps I didn't have to buy a fancy car. You can get upset about that if you like. But if you're not financially free, it's also pretty difficult to stand up and tell the truth. Even if you make a lot of money, if you're reliant on, let's say, a sports team for a contract, even if you make a lot of money, if you don't have enough saved, you can't tell the truth. Even if you're rich, they're all still complying and bending because they have a contract they're adhering to. It's difficult. So I don't think that if you had somebody who was trying to inspire the masculine youth of tomorrow to resist the slave mind, teaching them to be financially free would be a bad thing. I think it would actually be a good thing.
And always says the left is.
So that's my first clip. And I think this is a really, really important point. You know, if we want to escape the matrix, and Andrew and Candace go on in my third clip today to discuss what they think that might be, is if you want to escape the matrix, if you're financially dependent for your food, for your water, for your shelter, and for your medical care on the government or on your employer, it's really, really difficult to stand up and say no. We've seen this so much. Look at how many people have been effectively forced into making decisions that they didn't want to make over the last 3 years because they'd have lost their job and therefore lost their house, not been able to feed their family. Absolute disaster. And this is a really, really serious issue for everyone, which is why I harp on so much about creating alternative income sources for yourself. No one is above this control in some respects in this matrix we live in. I mean, look at how many people recently have had their bank accounts frozen. Look at the Canadian truckers who anyone who's donated to them has been traced back and been in trouble and had their bank accounts frozen. It goes on and on and on. However, there's stuff we can do to minimize the chances and minimize the financial control that people have on us. It's so stressful if you are financially dependent on the government or on an employer, depending obviously who that employer is. And unfortunately, a lot of the big employers have proved themselves to be not very caring for their employees and not open to not using coercive control measures, which is really, really hard. Just looking at my doggy, sorry, she's very unsettled. We've got people in the garden. So I think this financial control and about why people like Andrew Tate, you know, there's all sorts of things we can go into in his past, and he does in this interview. So this isn't relevant to the discussion here. I'm asking people to say, look at the message and separate that from the person giving the message, because it's really, really important. You know, if you are a slave to the system, they have got power over you, and you are very, very limited into how much you can stand up to the system and say no to things that you really don't want to happen on an individual level and on a more society level. So let me know what you think about that. What are you doing below to sort of try and diversify and get yourself more financially free? All of us, it's difficult. I'm not saying these things are easy, but when we talk about them and when we really start standing up and saying no, if you haven't got that financial pressure on you, it gives you a lot more choice in life. And I'm not saying we're all going to be multi-millionaires or whatever he is like Andrew Tate, but there's a lot we can do to take the day-to-day pressures off ourselves by getting alternative forms of income that aren't tying us to one thing, which always, always leaves us vulnerable. Let me know what you think. Let's get on to the next clip and we'll see what you've got to say about that. So this one, let's see what they've got to say about how manipulated we are.
If you look at all of their ideas, they lead to death, right? You can't procreate. You're killing off your own offspring. Every single one of their ideas leads to death and destruction. It's unbelievable. So in the end, you'd have to have perspective that conservatives win naturally, because we're talking about
if we own the culture.
Yeah.
But we don't. So what they're doing is they're using the culture to psyop enough young children who are not living a traditionalistic life, like you're saying, or not having a strong family, nuclear family to keep them against the slave programming. And they're using them to create the new generation of death cultists to continue to keep humanity under attack. But I don't know. I really struggle. As a person, I try my very best to, my father had a saying, which I use, I allow manipulation to find out where my enemy wants me to go, and then I use my mind to break the trap and punish the perpetrator. And the reason he said that was because if you don't allow them to manipulate you, you don't know exactly where they want you to go. If they try to manipulate you and you absolutely not resist, you might end up taking another path towards the same destination. So you should allow them to manipulate you. Watch the slave programming, watch the propaganda, watch all of it. Find out what you want, then what they want you to believe, and then you can use your mind to instantly break the trap. I did it in COVID. And when I first watched COVID, when I watched the Italian hospitals and people falling over in China, at the very, very beginning of it, I sat there and thought, what do they want me to believe? They want me to be scared of this disease. They want me to be afraid. No, I'm not going to be afraid. So if I'm not afraid, what's the answer? Well, the answer is to go to which country? Sweden's open. Nobody talks about the fact that Sweden was open the whole time, never closed ever. I mean, interesting, we're in nightclubs the entire time people were locked in their houses. Nobody talks about this. It's like no one mentions it anymore. But you have to use your mind to break the trap. And I feel like I've tried to allow my mind to be psyoped into this transgender stuff or this abortion stuff. And even I can't even pretend to buy into it. I can't see how you can reach that level of delusion.
This person, this must be true.
Fascinating, isn't it? I mean, manipulation is everywhere. We've been subjected to it for so long. No wonder it's so difficult for people to actually recognize it. But once you do see it, you see it absolutely everywhere. One of the things I particularly loved about that is what Andrew was talking about, how his father was saying that sometimes it's really important to let people manipulate you to a certain extent, deliberately be consciously aware that you're being manipulated, so you're really clear about where they're trying to get you to, and then you can use your mind to resist the manipulation. Now, one of the reasons I think that's so important is I see a lot, and this is just my perspective, but I know a lot of other people are seeing it too, in the alternative media. Are they manipulating us in the same way? David Icke has talked about this for years and years. If you understand what their end goal is, then it's really clear how they're using all these different tools in their toolkit to manipulate us to get us to the end goal. But if you don't understand where that end goal is, some of the methods that they're using, it's the same in cult behavior, it's the same with narcissists, can be really hard for people to pick up on, because there's always a little bit of truth in there. If you look at some of the climate agenda, which is another subject I'm going to be talking about with some really interesting guests. If you haven't seen my Dane Wigginton interview, please go back and look at the climate engineering. I diversify. But if you really sort of understand where people are trying to get you to, it's really, really clear how something that can sound quite innocent is actually, you can see through it and see how it's really taking you down a very dangerous path. And this is why so many people that don't understand things like Agenda 2030, don't understand the power of corruption at the top levels, no wonder they think some of these plans are quite innocent, because they've got no idea where they're heading for. So I think Andrew picked up on that really, really importantly. And I think it's something we miss. And I think sometimes we've got to be really careful with the alternative media as well. Are we clear what the end goal is? Therefore, are there different people trying to get us there in different ways? One example I would give to that is anyone who's preaching that we don't have to take personal accountability and personal action. This links back to the personal financial freedom. Anyone who's preaching that, or just spreading the news that we can sit there and just wait for us to all be given financial abundance. Well, by whom? You know, the universe doesn't work like that. Yes, I do believe there's enough abundance for everyone, but if someone or some entity or some system is suddenly going to go out and hand out Jasara and Nasara and give us all financial abundance and freedom, so to speak, there's always some individuals behind that, from whatever planet they're from. So those are the people that have still got power over you. So for me, diversifying your interest, being aware of this and sort of saying, look, is the Nasara Dasara talk just as dangerous as the central bank's digital currency? Think about it yourself. See what you think. Don't go along with what I think. I only know a tiny bit of the picture, but these are the questions I'm asking myself all the time. And actually, the more I keep asking those questions, the more clarity I get. So once again, I'd love to know what you think. And I think this is why sometimes some really outspoken people like Andrew Tate, like Candace Owens, a lot of the things that are put across to put people off them, all the while someone is trying to get you to criticize an individual. Just ask yourself, are they really trying to stop you listening to the message that that individual is giving across? Might or might not be the case. We might all have different answers to that. But for me, I'm noticing that more and more, that the more people put out criticisms over a specific individual, be cautious that they're not trying to take you on the path to their own goal. Let's look at the third clip. I really love this one. So here we're going to look at what Candace and Andrew think is what is the matrix. Whoops, I've just lost that. Let me just get back to the right thing. Let me just get back to the start of that. Right.
You at all.
Got it. Well, it's up to them to come to their own conclusions about me. I'll live my life and I'll continue to live my fantastic life and I'll be the best person I can be. And they can come to their own conclusions. They can make videos in support of me or attacking me for the rest of human time. I'm not going to watch any of it. I'm not interested. Right. So that's those two. But in regards to the matrix as a whole, the matrix I believe, and I use the term the Matrix from the movie because I think it perfectly describes the world we're in today. I believe we're living in a false reality which is projected inside of our minds, and it's designed to distract us long enough for our bodies to be abused. And the movie is for body heat. In the real world, perhaps is for some physical labor, but I believe that we're not living in a real version of reality. I believe there are gatekeepers on the truth, the agents, who try their very best to keep us asleep. And I think the end goal is to keep us distracted long enough for our body to be utilized and then for us to die. Who is the Matrix and what is the Matrix as a whole? I have to be very careful what I say, and I don't want to get in too much trouble. But I think anybody who is perspicacious enough to understand how the world works understands that the media machine is trying very hard to keep us convinced of certain ideas, and also to keep us arguing about very unimportant ideas. So people behind the media machine who decide what goes on the news can do whatever they want to do. And the things they do usually have dire consequences to all of our lives.
Right.
So I would say that the Matrix as a whole is the media machine from the projection point of view, and that the people who control the media try very hard to make sure they have ultimate control over all governments and all important decisions on the planet.
I agree. I totally agree.
Welcome to the conspiracy.
Welcome to the conspiracy. Don't listen to my podcast. I'm in on like CIA documents, like showing people it's not a conspiracy theory. These are declassified CIA documents. These are things that they actually did and that nobody pays attention to because it happened 60 years ago, but it's been declassified. All of the operations that they had, putting actual journalists under CIA pay. I mean, it's crazy. Following the death of JFK, why did they do that? Why did they suddenly feel it was necessary to have journalists on payroll following the death of a president? Who there were a lot of questions surrounding his death. So you've got the right audience with me in terms of that. I think the media is the enemy of the American people. Yeah. That is why I liked Trump calling that out right away, talking about fake news.
What I don't understand is why anybody listens to anything they say.
I know it is
because they've been caught lying so many times. Is it just because they lie on repeat over and over again to the point where people just accept it? Is it because it's cowardice and accepting that these people constantly lie to you makes you adopt a worldview, which is scary because you have to now think for yourself? I'm not sure what it is, but how after, especially the last 5 to 6 years, can you believe a word these people say to you?
Well, because if they say it enough, it becomes true. And they've been able to show that if you say something over and over again to someone, they will accept it as a truth. And that was another declassified CIA experiment. It was super interesting. They put a bunch of people in the room. So let's say there's 20 people in a room, right? And 19 of them are agents, and one of them is actually the person they're testing. And they show you a picture of what is clearly a banana. Yeah. And they go around the room. The last person they get to is the one that's being experimented on. Everyone else is an agent. And they say, what is this? And the first person says, apple. Apple. It's clearly a banana. Yeah. By the time they get to that 19th person who is not an agent, that person just says, it's an apple, even though it's clearly a banana. They don't even believe their own eyes anymore because they're going, okay, well, if 18 people in this room have said that it's an apple, what do you see? An apple, apple, apple. Then they just say apple. So there's a lot of evidence. They do it because it works, and everything around us shows you it works. We're right now debating whether or not children can pick their gender. How did we get here? This is something that you couldn't even fathom when we were in high school. That people would be saying like your little boy could be a little girl, but we're here today, and actual adults are believing this information because it's been said enough times to whatever segment of the population that they're accepting it as true. So they do it because it's been effective.
So many points I want to pick out of that one. What is the Matrix and how we're brainwashing, and how there's so many psychological experiments that have been done. That's just one that Candace mentioned. We all know of lots more where there's something in our human psyche that makes it really difficult for us to stand up against a crowd. There was experiments done that show that people would do really evil things if they're told by an authority figure or someone in a white coat to do it. And I think herein lies the crux. There are a lot of people that are still believing everything, and that goes on both sides. It goes on the side of the real media and the alternative media. It goes for the pharmaceutical companies. I mean, look how many times the big pharmaceutical companies have been sued. It's ridiculous. If anyone was doing this with where you were buying your car from, or your child's car safety seat, or you just wouldn't ever use those companies again. But for some reason, these companies seem to be able to get away with it time after time after time, and their profits are so obscene that they can pay the bills and still do very well out of it for their shareholders. So this matrix about what is it? Obviously, there's the the master controllers, the media, the puppet masters, the politicians, the education system, the medical system, you name it, it just goes on and on and on. Look at the film industry, and how many times are we looking at now for the messages that have been clearly put out to us? And this is part of the consent that the dark side say, that if they put the messages out there and people do nothing about it, then that is effectively consent. So I think these points that these interview is absolutely brilliant. As I said, I've got loads more. What do you think? What do you think we are? What point are we at in the matrix? Most importantly, what tools are working for you to break free of it? And I don't think any of us have broken free of it completely. I certainly haven't. I mean, you know, there's still things that obviously I'm always going to look at that I think it's going to take me a time to discern over which way it is. And sometimes hindsight's 20/20. But isn't it ridiculous about how distracted we're being now on all sides of the media about talking about gender? You know, who'd have thought even 5 years ago these conversations would be real? Who would have believed at the start of 2020 that they could lock the whole nation down and people would be wearing masks to, you know, queue up outside a restaurant and to walk to their table, and then they'd take their masks off, and then they'd eat their meal, and then they'd put their masks on to go to the toilet. We talk about this in a different clip. Let me know if you want to see more or not. Do you like this? Do you think it's useful to get some of these other podcasts and take out some bits and review things and see what it means for us? I would encourage anyone to go and listen to this full 3 hours of the podcast. There's so much depth in there on so many different subject matters that all of us have been talking about for the last few years, and some people have been talking about for the last 20, 30 years and longer. These conversations need to happen. And I think, once again, I will make the point that how often are we as listeners of consumers of information focusing on whether or not we resonate or like the individual rather than listening to the message? And depending where we're at with our own journey, sometimes the individual will be really triggering for us if it's showing up areas where we're lacking confidence. You know, there's a lot of people that find it really difficult to speak their truth. They're ridiculed, they might be threatened with dismissal, they might have access to their account shut down. You know, I mean, look at us, all of us speaking on YouTube. We know we're still very, very censored about what we can and can't say. But we get round it as well as we can with code words, because we have to keep having these conversations. And I think this was a brilliant conversation to have. It really made me re-examine so many different areas. It made me think about how I could articulate things differently. It made me think about why I was being triggered by certain points, etc. One of the really important things, I mean, I didn't really know who Andrew Tate was recently. I'm not exactly his demographic, a middle-aged woman, which makes me even more pleased that I identified with so many of it. If we can break down these boundaries and take away the prejudices from things, then there's so much we can learn from these conversations. So I really enjoyed this. I went through this interview several times with the help of my daughter to clip out some of these bits. I've got loads more clips that I've picked out of things that really stood out for me. I'd really love your feedback in the comments below. Have you listened to the interview? What did you think? For the bits that I've clipped out, what did they raise for you? Did they trigger you? Did you agree with them? Did you like the way it was put it across? Have you got better ways to put it across? What wasn't mentioned? Please, please just be careful in your comments below, though, because certain trigger words that I'm not allowed to use, that Candace Owens isn't allowed to use, that Andrew Tate, if you put those trigger words or links in the comments, then that can trigger a ban as well. So being aware of the censorship issues, please let me know. These conversations are so important. Would you like to see more of it? I hope so. I enjoy it, but at the end of the day, it's up to you guys, so let me know. Thank you for listening, and thank you, Candace Owens and Andrew Tate, for an absolutely brilliant interview. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen, and if you feel inspired, please do share with your friends and family. My goal is to inspire as many people as I can to live their best lives, to stay curious, and to raise their consciousness and that of the collective. So to do this, I need to reach as many people as possible, and this needs your help. If you feel drawn, would you be willing to share your favourite episode with 5 different people? This helps us spread the word and also helps me encourage some exciting new guests to take part in this podcast. If you feel drawn to do that, I will be very, very grateful. All the links and discount codes where applicable for all the products that I support are on my 2 websites, catherineedwards.life and catherineedwardsacademy.com. All of the products are personally tried and tested by me, my family and my clients. And finally, please do press the follow or subscribe button, depending which platform you're listening on. And above all, stay curious and stay free.